Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today is the second in my two-part video series talking about the changes coming up in Preseason 14. This video is specifically going to be focusing on the itemization changes, and as this is a pretty dense video with lots of talk about numbers and words and things that have changed, I didn't feel it was appropriate to keep the page up because it would be pretty boring otherwise, but I will have it linked in the description if you want to read it yourself. There was a previous video that I made talking about the bigger map changes and changes to Epic Monsters. If you're interested, that will also be linked in the description if you want to take a look at that before you see this, but I want to talk about the items in today's video. Now, the Preseason 14 is coming with the end of the Mythic item system, and this is nothing but a good thing in my mind. This is removing things like item exclusivity, it's adding back in build path variety, and I think more importantly, it's also adding in the ability for some champions to actually be able to make itemization changes that they like. For example, Urgot does not have a Mythic item he cares about or even remotely wants to use, and I think it's a very cool thing then that Riot are saying, yeah, there are other champions that feel very similar, and we actually want to make them feel like they have itemization changes that they can have. So as a result, I'm happy to see the end of the Mythic item system, but there are a bunch of changes that need to be made as a result of this. There are a lot of Mythic items that need to be depowered, and there are some that are getting removed. I made a video talking about which items I thought would get removed, and I was right on some, but there were some that surprised me that stuck around. Anyways, let's start talking about the changes here. First of all, and I want to address this immediately, Stopwatch is gone, and I could not be happier. The delta between Stopwatch in casual play and Stopwatch in competitive play was so impossibly wide that in casual play, it may as well not exist, and in pro play, it was ever-present everywhere. The perfect timing rune, of course, got used a ton to give you a free stopwatch. People would just buy stopwatches anytime they had 600-ish gold lying around, and there were so many team fights that were so boring because just champion after champion after champion starts turning gold. And it was not fun to watch, and I'm so grateful to see the back of it. It isn't gone necessarily permanently, slight spoilers, but the new execution is way, way better. Suffice to say, stopwatch is dead and buried, thank God. There is a new support item similar to Dead Man's Plate that is being introduced. This was the one that we voted on the theming for, and it looks like the Ishtali theme won, but that item is getting added to the game. It's sort of like Dead Man's Plate if it was less selfish. There's less movement speed granted to you, but the first auto attack you make still slows, and you create a trail that allies can run behind and get bonus movement speed, so that's kind of nice for supportive tanks. Speaking of supports, support items have all been simplified. Now, all supports buy the same starting item, which gives them gold for damaging enemy champions and also for executing minions. You get charges, and you choose what to do with those charges, suffice it to say. But as you generate gold, it upgrades until you have a Wardstone version, and then there's a final version of it where it finishes upgrading. However, at that point, you can spend gold to upgrade it into one of 5 different forms, sort of describing all of the general support aesthetics. The Enchanter supports, the Harass supports, the tank supports, the engage supports, and the selfish mages like Lux and Brand that aren't really supports but see play in the bot lane anyways, right? They all have a version of this item that they can be upgrading it into. If you're interested, of course, do read the article that I have linked down below, but suffice to say, supports, you'll all build the same item, and then you get to customize it as you see fit later into the game. But let's move into the individual champion class categories and talk through things that have changed, starting with the mage items. First off, the removals. Crown of the Shattered Queen, Everfrost, Leeching Leer, Demonic Embrace, Night Harvester, and Luden's Tempest have been removed. A lot of these surprised me. I predicted Everfrost, and I was about 50-50 on Night Harvester and Crown of the Shattered Queen, but Luden's Tempest going away really surprises me. This item has been in the game for ages now, and the fact that Riot said, nah, get it out of here, really comes as a surprise to me. I feel like there are going to be a requirement for a lot more Lost Chapter items being added back into the game, and fortunately it does look like Riot have delivered. Also, you'll note, Leeching Leer is gone, but Riftmaker is not. Another small spoiler there. A couple of new items to discuss here. Malignance is going to be an item that's good for mages that have ready access to their ultimate and who can CC champions with it to maximize the burn damage that they're able to put out. This is especially going to be useful on a champion like Karma or LeBlanc who have very low ultimate cooldowns. Caster's Companion is another new sort of core item that's going to be powerful for poke mages like Xerath, especially if they can use it against isolated targets, but that does sort of help with their wave clear in a way that's maybe a little bit more intelligible than Luden's Tempest. And Storm Surge, not the Warhammer version, seems like a very powerful item for burst mages and AP assassins by giving you movement speed to help keep pace with your target and extra damage to finish the kill, and potentially extra gold as well, really putting it in that place where it says, hey, the LeBlancs, the Dianas, champions that want to be going in and pressing all their buttons and deleting a target, target, this is a very good item for you, potentially something to synergize your build around. Finally, Crypt Bloom is an interesting support choice that can give allies who are near a dead champion healing. I'm not really sure who would use this, but I think it's a neat choice at the very least regardless. Finally, discuss the old items for mages. Haunting Guise is back and builds into Riftmaker now. Riftmaker is also now the only item that has Omnivamp on it, which I think is fine. I think AP champions need it. I don't think anyone else does. I'm really happy that Omnivamp is gone as a stat in general, as I do feel like it means more power can be shifted back into champions versus where it is currently, where Aatrox has to have really crap Omnivamp to compensate for the fact that he can build so much of it through systemic choices. Liandry's Torment is back as well, another boon for AP bruisers. It's basically the same as it was before, but I think it's going to be way more balanceable now that it's not a core mage item. It no longer builds out of a lost chapter. It very much so is this is an AP bruiser item, and if you're a mage that doesn't mind building lots of health, you'll be happy with this, but otherwise, steer clear. I really like this. Horizon Focus now reveals enemy champions within 1200 range of your target on a 30-second cooldown. This means that if you fire, let's say, a Xerath Q and a Fog of War and you hit somebody, it will have a big bloom of reveal to give you the ability to maybe line up extra shots or at least give you some scouting potential. I do like that change. And to touch on the stopwatch point from earlier, Seeker's Arm Guard is now stopwatch. It has an active on it when you finish Seeker's Arm Guard that gives you a one-time Zhonya's Hourglass use before it becomes Broken Arm Guard. That said, this is a 1600 gold item. You are not building this item unless you are committed to building the Zhonya's Hourglass, right? So like a Kai'Sa, for example, I could see grab a Seeker's Arm Guard just to have the Zhonya's active because she can still build Zhonya's. It doesn't really matter. But like, I'm Lee Sin. I'm not wasting 1600 gold on a stopwatch. It's not worth it to me when I get benefits from none of the stats and it requires me to stack up the armor on it. It just doesn't make any sense. Much more happy with how they've executed on the stopwatch passive in this regard. And finally, Shadow Flame now gives bonus damage to enemies below 35% health instead of the extra penetration against recently shielded targets, which makes it more reliably good for AP assassins and burst mages. Big happy to see this. Moving on to the assassin items. Duskblade of Drakthar and Prowler's Claw are gone. Prowler's Claw doesn't surprise me ever since it was demoted as a mythic, but Drakthar will certainly come as a surprise to many players. I was pretty certain it would go away due to how frustrating it can be, but a lot of people in my comments disagreed with me. They said, no, Drakthar will stay. People like it. It was fine before the mythic item system. It'll stick around. It's gone, and I think that's the correct choice because of how frustrating it was to play against. I just really think that did not make it a good item. To talk about some new items here, though, to replace the old ones, Voltaic Cyclosword, on top of having the best name I've ever seen in a new item, gives an energized attack that slows and deals bonus damage like Duskblade did, though the slow is melee only. If you're ranged, you can still make use of that, but if you're melee, you also get the 99% slow for like a quarter second or something like that, making it a very suitable replacement for champions that liked Duskblade, not necessarily for the resets. Profane Hydra is an item that builds out of a Tiamat and has a Hydra-like active effect that deals bonus damage to low health enemies. Champions like Neferi will love this. You already want Hydra for wave clear. Now you also have something that allows you to finish off low health targets. Hubris, on top of being another banger name, gives you a statue of yourself when you kill an enemy champion, and you get bonus AD that scales very poorly with the number of statues you have after you kill champs for a brief duration. This is going to be very good for reset fighters, or for fighters that just want to be roaming the map, picking off champions time after time. I'm Talon, I roam bot lane, I kill a champion, I get stacks, I get the passive for a brief period of time, I run mid lane, I kill a guy, I get stacks, I refresh my passive. Some things there that you can probably do. Opportunity, meanwhile, gives you bonus lethality while you're out of combat with champions. That drops off a few seconds after you enter champion combat, similar to how Ghostblade works right now. I would assume Ghostblade is getting a smaller rework. This isn't going to touch on all the item changes, guys. There's way too much to talk about. This is mostly just going to be the new items and items that change in a significant margin. So this feels like the Ghostblade as it exists on Summoner's Rift right now, which I think is totally a fine niche for items. And if you kill someone with opportunity, you get bonus movement speed to either continue the chase on other champions or to fade away with. So it's good for hit-and-run assassins or reset killers alike. In terms of old items, the Brutalizer is back, baby, and it still costs 1,337 gold. If you don't get that reference, I'm old. And meanwhile, Serylda's Grudge now only slows enemies below 50% health. This is a big nerf to champions like Ezreal, who built it for slows on hit, but I think generally makes more sense with its sort of profile. Moving on to talk about tank items. The removals in the tank item category are Turbo Chem Tank, Radiant Virtue, Even Shroud, Gargoyle Stone Plate, Aegis of the Legion, and Lifewell Pendant. Many of these don't really surprise me too much. I predicted a lot of these to get removed, but Aegis going away is big sad, especially when so many classic items like the Brutalizer are returning. To remove Aegis of the Legion now feels very disappointing, but admittedly, with all the items it builds into also going away, I think it makes a lot of sense. In terms of new items, Hollow Radiance is a new Sunfire Cape-like item that builds out of a Spectre's Cowl, which means if you want Sunfire Cape but you're against an AP top laner, you can build this item, and it works well for you, which I'm very happy about this item, very excited for it. And it also gives you bonus damage in an AoE when you kill an enemy unit. I'm not sure why it needed that, but I guess that's kind of cool. Meanwhile, Unending Despair gives you periodic magic damage to nearby enemy champions and heals you for a large percentage of the damage dealt. It's something like every 7 seconds in combat, you get the drain effect. This is basically, so spoiler alert, Jak'Sho no longer has the drain effect, so if you want, like old Jak'Sho, build Unending Despair plus Jak'Sho the Protean, and you'll be able to have sort of the same effect, just much weaker. Finally, Kaenic Rookern, a very weird name, gives you a magic damage shield while you're out of combat, just like Galio's W passive. This means Galio players who are going tank are very excited, but every tank can now benefit from this. In terms of old items, Jak'Sho the Protean no longer drains champs, I already talked about that, but it also only gives you value at full stacks, meaning that if you aren't able to trigger the full passive, if people hit you for 4 seconds then run away, you're never really going to get to benefit from the percentage increase it gives your resist. Deadman's Plate now has a slow resist passive, which is quite nice for the item, and Force of Nature now gives extra magic resistance and extra movement speed while at maximum stacks, and you build stacks every time you take magic damage, and double stacks if you get hit by an immobilizing ability. I think that's kind of a fun way of allowing Force of Nature to potentially stack up more quickly if you're getting picked off, for example. Moving on to Enchanter items. Chemtech Putrefier and Chalice of Harmony have been removed. I think Putrefier leaving is kind of a weird one. I like supports being able to build a Grievous Wounds item in that it's still sort of benefited every champion, but I kind of get why it's been removed as it's been tweaked so many times. It's just sort of in a weird spot. Chalice of Harmony, though, leaving is an interesting one. There are a few new items to talk about, though. Glowing Moat is a new cheap ability haste item that builds into a lot of support items. Dawn Core is a new item that grants extra heal and shield power based on your mana regeneration and gives summoner spells extra haste. This is a very fun item that I think will be a very powerful capstone on many supports that get lots of mana regeneration. Echoes of Helia lost its Dissonance passive because Chalice of Harmony is gone, and it now just builds from a Kindle Gem. And Staff of Flowing Water gives the user extra AP and movement speed when shielding or healing an ally. This actually makes it, I think, a little interesting on supportive mid laners like Orianna or Karma, who can go heal or shield an ally and then give themselves the movement speed and AP as well. Maybe some fun things I think you could do with that. Next up are the fighter items. Gore Drinker, Divine Sunderer, Silvermere Dawn, and Iron Spike Whip are gone. I am so happy Sunderer is gone. I wanted it gone in my prediction video, and it finally is. It's basically just the Sheen passive, the Mythic item, the item. It wasn't exciting at all. I think it was too impactful on a lot of champions that were building it. I am happy to see the back of it. I am a little surprised Silvermere Dawn is gone. It wasn't a build me every game type item, but it was exceptionally useful to have, especially on fighters who want the ability to shed crowd control every so often, especially with champs like Mordekaiser running around, and being able to turn that QSS into something useful for you was a very nice thing. And now that it's gone, I guess everyone just buys QSS and sits on it, I guess. It doesn't sit right with me that it's gone. Just because it had a low usage rate doesn't mean it was a bad item, but I guess it's gone now, so who am I to say that? In terms of new items, Sunder to Sky causes your first attack against a champion to crit and heal yourself based on your missing health and base AD. This is going to be what I think a lot of Drain tanks pivot to, though of course they'll be having very interesting itemization choices moving forwards. And the Nitro Hexaegis, another banger name, gives you extra attack speed and movement speed after you use your ultimate. This is going to be perfect for form-swapping champions like Riven, who press R before going in. Riven presses R, she gets the bonus attack speed and movement speed, and then she goes in to do her combo, and she's got a ton of stats. I could see it being an option on champions like that. In terms of old items, Tiamat and both Hydras, the Titanic and Ravenous variants, both regained their actives in the versions that they were before the Mythic item update. Very happy to see this. Hullbreaker no longer has the be alone effect, but it still grants allied large minions bonus resist, and gives you a powerful auto attack every few auto attacks against structures specifically. So it's like every 5th auto attack deals like a ton of bonus damage to structures. So it still is solidly the split push camp, but less of its power is tied up in just like the 1v1 potential that it had. Stridebreaker is still here, apparently. I really didn't think this item was going to survive the cull. It still has its slowing active, but it slows for less now, and instead it grants you bonus movement speed when you slow champions with it, plus it has the old Phage Rage passive. And speaking of which, Phage has its Rage passive back, so every item that builds out of a Phage now gives you bonus movement speed on hit for a couple of seconds. Very excited to see this come back. Wit's End has received some small changes. It only gives magic damage on hit now, no more generating extra magic resistance. And Spear Shojin no longer has the ability haste passive. You still have extra haste on non-ultimate abilities, but that's it. And instead, spell hits grant you stacks that cause you to deal bonus damage with your spells. So it's going to be great for AD casters, right? Garen walks at you, he starts spinning, every spin hit gives him a stack, every stack gives him bonus damage on the spin. There are some things there that I could possibly see this item being used for. Very excited with all the fighter changes. I think these are all very good. In general, I'm actually quite happy with almost all the item changes that Riot are making, to be completely honest. Finally, AD carry items, Rage Knife, not the blade, the knife, and Gale Force are gone. We knew about Gale Force. Rage Knife is an odd one. I really thought that the mini Rage Blade made sense for champions that were trying to go on hit, but with its removal now, you don't get it until you get your Ginsu's, but I guess Ginsu's is a better rush item. Not sure what to make of it, but I guess we'll see how it shapes up moving forwards. In terms of new items, Terminus is a new item that gives you magic damage on hit, but also has alternating attacks. You alternate light and dark attacks. Light attacks give you extra armor and magic resistance, and dark attacks grant extra penetration. This is going to be good for both fighters and for on-hit champions. I'm kind of curious as to who's actually going to build this. It feels like a fighter item to me, but I could see marksman using it. We'll see what the build path looks like. And finally, for old items in the AD carry tree, Guardian Angel now restores you with 50% HP and 100% mana upon resurrection, making it a lot less likely that your second life ends as quickly as your first one did. And Phantom Dancer is, it's called out here, but it looks largely unchanged. It builds from a Hearthstone axe now, I guess, but otherwise it looks like basically the same item. Generally, I'm very happy with all these changes. Again, I think fighters have much more distinction in terms of their builds. They lost a lot of their build around me items and instead got back a lot of old standby favorites. And now that they have the freedom of going back to things like Trinity Force or Black Cleaver first, I think fighters are going to be feeling very good about their choices. Mages have a ton of new tools to play with. It's hard to really get a grasp on where a mage itemization is going to be following the changes, but they have an absolute ton of options that they have at their disposal to build. I think it's going to be very exciting to be a mage player following this update, and most of the other classes really didn't lose or gain that much. It really kind of feels like they have a lot of choices at their disposal and different things that they'll be able to do, but generally your itemization options are feeling very, very much so the same, but also you have the advantage then of being able to be like, hey, I want to actually, you know, buy this item first and combo with this item, and those are options now in terms of the new system. So very happy with the items update. I wasn't very happy in the previous video, but I'm very happy in this one. Excited to see where Riot go with the items moving forwards. But let me know what you think of all this down in the comment section below. Definitely go read the patch notes when you have a chance, or the preview article when you have a chance. Patch notes aren't out yet, but the preview article has a ton of things to delve into, so definitely take a look when you have an opportunity. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.